I wasn't sure whether I should tell you this story. I mean, it will teach you lots of really useful British expressions that you hear all the time from native English speakers, and you will get a full explanation of these in the free guidebook that you can download in the description. Of course, you get to practice your English listening and reading skills. No, the thing is, this is a true story. It really happened to me, and well, it's a little embarrassing. But I'm sure you won't tell anyone. Hi, I'm Steve. Let's do this. A cue, a photo, and a very big mistake. It was a Saturday in 1995, and I was bored. Properly bored. The sort of bored where you start looking for any excuse to get out of the house. I was living in Warrington at the time. That's a town in Cheshire that sits somewhere between Manchester and Liverpool. I'd been talking to a couple of my work colleagues, and they told me about this place called Bygone Times. It was an old converted mill up in Eccleston, just outside the town of Chorley in Lancashire. And apparently it was well worth a visit if you had a free afternoon and nothing better to do. I had a free afternoon, and I had nothing better to do. The drive took less than an hour, which suited me fine. I wasn't looking for a grand adventure, just something to break up the weekend monotony. When I pulled into the car park, I have to admit the building itself was quite impressive. These old mills always are. Solid Victorian architecture, all red brick and tall windows. The kind of place that had probably employed half the town back in its day. Now it had been given a new lease of life as some sort of shopping complex. I walked inside and found myself in a maze of stalls and little shops, spread across multiple floors. The place was busy enough, families wandering about, couples browsing, the usual Saturday afternoon crowd. I started on the ground floor and worked my way up, taking my time, not really looking for anything in particular. Most of the stalls were selling what you might call artsy crafty stuff. Handmade candles, pottery, dried flower arrangements, that sort of thing. Not really my cup of tea, to be honest. I'm not knocking it, but I've never been the type to get excited about decorative soap or hand-painted plant pots. I kept browsing, hoping to find something a bit more interesting. By the time I reached the third floor, I'd more or less resigned myself to heading home. My colleagues had mentioned there was a cafe on the top floor, so I figured I'd have a quick cup of tea before leaving. But then something caught my eye. Tucked away in one corner was a stall that looked completely different from all the others. No candles here, no pottery. Instead, the walls were covered in framed photographs of famous people, autographed sports shirts, bits of film memorabilia, that sort of thing. Now this was more like it. There was quite a crowd gathered around the stall. In fact, there was a big queue snaking from the front, easily the largest queue I'd seen anywhere in the building. I thought that was a bit odd for a memorabilia stall, but then again, maybe there was a sale on or something. I decided to have a closer look anyway. I joined the back of the line and tried to peer over the heads of the people in front of me to see what they had on offer. That's when I spotted it. Hanging on the back wall, surrounded by other framed photos of various celebrities, was a picture of the cast of the Beverly Hillbillies. It was an American TV show from the 1960s. The whole cast was in the photo, and it appeared to have been autographed. Now, I loved this show when I was younger. It was one of my TV highlights, one of those shows I never missed. The idea of having a signed cast photo hanging in my office at work really appealed to me. It would be a great talking point, something a bit different. I could already imagine my colleagues asking about it. So I stayed in the queue, waiting my turn. And wait I did. The queue moved at a snail's pace. The people at the front seemed to be taking ages, chatting away with the people running the stall, laughing about something, really taking their time. I couldn't see what was causing the hold-up, but after about 20 minutes, I was starting to wonder if this photo was really worth the bother. Still, I'd already invested the time, and more people had joined the queue behind me. I hate giving up on something once I've committed to it, so I stuck it out. Finally, I reached the front. There were two people running the stall, both men. One was sitting down behind a small table, and the other, a noticeably shorter fellow, was standing to one side. The seated man looked up at me with a friendly enough expression. "How can I help you?" he asked. His West Country accent immediately caught my attention. It was the sort you might hear in a pirate film. You don't hear that accent much up in my neck of the woods, so it really stood out. "Can I take a look at that photo, please?" I asked, pointing to the Beverly Hillbillies picture hanging on the back wall. "I think it would look great in my office. I used to love that show as a kid." The reaction he gave was not what I expected. The man stared at me as though I'd just asked him something utterly bizarre. His expression was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "I'm sorry?" he said. I thought perhaps he hadn't heard me properly over the general noise of the building. "That photo there of the Beverly Hillbillies," I repeated, gesturing more clearly this time. "Can I take a look at it?" He shook his head slowly, as if trying to process what I'd just said, and then he stood up. That's when I realised just how tall this man was, and I mean tall. He absolutely towered over me, well over 6 feet, probably closer to 6'6" or 7. He seemed to unfold as he rose from his chair, and suddenly I felt quite small. The other assistant standing beside him looked positively tiny by comparison. The tall man walked over to the back wall and carefully took down the photo. As he did, I became aware of a change in atmosphere behind me. The people in the queue were starting to mutter. "This is ridiculous," someone grumbled. "Have you heard what he just asked him to do?" said another voice. I turned round and gave them what I hoped was a pointed look. It wasn't being funny, but I'd waited just like everyone else. If they had a problem, they could take it up with the management, not me. The huge shop assistant returned with the photo and held it out so I could examine it properly. Up close, I could see it was nicely framed, the picture itself in good condition, and yes, there were autographs all over it. The cast members' names in various colours of ink spread across the white border of the photo. "It's a nice picture," he said, that lovely strong accent coming through again, "but it's not really been autographed." I looked more closely and saw what he meant. The signatures weren't actually on the photograph at all. They'd been carefully cut out from what must have been an autograph book or separate pieces of paper and then stuck onto the photo's border. It was neat work, I'll give them that, but it wasn't the genuine article. How much is it? I asked. I'm not sure, he replied. I'll go and ask. He disappeared somewhere behind the stall, presumably to check with whoever was in charge of pricing. While he was gone, the crowd behind me grew even more restless. I glanced back and was genuinely shocked to see that the queue had grown absolutely massive. There must have been well over 100 people waiting now, stretching back across the floor and round the corner. The size of the crowd was remarkable, far more than I'd have expected in a place like this. The guy came back a few moments later, still carrying the photo. It's £80, he said. 80 quid for a photo that wasn't even genuinely autographed. That seemed rather pricey, even for a nostalgia junkie like me. I can't lie, I said. I'm disappointed that the photo itself hasn't been signed. I think I'll leave it, thanks. I don't blame you, he replied, with what seemed like genuine understanding. It does seem a bit steep for what it is. He walked back over to the wall and carefully rehung the photo in its original spot. When he returned to his position behind the table, he looked at me with that same friendly expression he'd had at the start. Is there anything else I can help you with? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I glanced to my left. The entire queue was staring at me, every single person. Even the other assistant was staring at me too. There was confusion on their faces, certainly, but also something else. Irritation, anger even, as they waited for what I would say next. The atmosphere had gone from mildly annoyed to actively hostile. I had absolutely no idea what I'd done wrong, but I decided that discretion was the better part of valour. No, you've been very kind, thanks, I said, and made myself scarce. As I walked away, I could hear the hubbub continue behind me. Snippets of conversation expressing disbelief and frustration. I decided the best course of action was to head up to the cafe on the top floor and do what all British people do in this type of situation. Have a well-deserved cuppa. Unlike at the Memorabilia stall, the cafe was quiet, and I found a table by the window overlooking the car park. I sat down with my tea and also treated myself to a chocolate biscuit, reflecting on what had got people so riled up. Why had everyone been so annoyed with me? All I'd done was ask to look at a photo. Surely that's what everyone did in that sort of shop. I had just finished my biscuit and was considering another when the tannoy system crackled to life. Just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, came a cheerful female voice. On the third floor we have a special guest appearance from the actor Dave Prowse, who played Darth Vader in Star Wars. He'll be happy to sign autographs and have his photo taken with you. I put down my cup. Dave Prowse, Darth Vader, the tall man with the West Country accent. Oh no. The penny dropped. The massive queue, the confusion when I'd asked him to fetch a photo from the wall, the anger from the crowd when I'd treated him like an ordinary shop assistant. They weren't queuing to browse the memorabilia, they were queuing to meet Darth Vader. And I'd made Darth Vader himself get up, walk across the room, take down a photo, show it to me, walk back, put it back on the wall, and then walk back again, in front of about 100 Star Wars fans who'd been waiting patiently for their turn to meet their hero. At this point, let me confess something to you. I've never seen Star Wars. Not a single film. I know, it's a cultural blind spot the size of the Death Star itself. But I just never got around to it. So when I'd been standing there talking to Dave Prowse about the Beverly Hillbillies, I hadn't the faintest idea who he was. As I sat in that cafe, I felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and amusement. The poor man had been so polite about the whole thing. He could have pointed out who he was, or his assistant could have said something. But instead, he just treated me like any other customer and humoured my request. I finished my tea fairly quickly and decided it was probably time to head home. On my way out, I made very sure to take the stairs so as to bypass the third floor. I had no desire to walk past that queue again and risk being recognised as the idiot who treated a Hollywood star like a shop assistant. Click on the bus to subscribe to this channel for more fun, everyday British language lessons. I'll see you next time.